Welcome to Unfixed. This podcast explores the intersection of artificial intelligence and the institution of higher education. I am Zach Justice, Professor of Communication Studies and Director of Faculty Development.
I am Nik Janos, Professor of Sociology.
We are employees of Chico State and we will discuss some of our work, but this podcast is not affiliated with Chico State and the views expressed here are not representative of the university. Unfixed is just part of our portfolio. Check out our writing at meltsintoair.org and subscribe to our twice-a-month newsletter where we run down the top AI news stories and connect them to higher education. Hey Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Zach?
I am good, and I feel especially good because we have a guest today.
We do. All right. So we're joined by Inara Scott. She's a nationally recognized expert in AI strategy, strategic innovation, pedagogy, and ethical leadership at the intersection of higher education and artificial intelligence. With a career spanning corporate law, regulatory affairs, and academia, Inara brings a unique blend of practical experience and scholarly depth, helping organizations navigate complex transitions with care and commitment to student success. Currently serving as Senior Advisor for Strategy Innovation at Oregon State University's College of Business, Inara leads mission-driven initiatives that include strategic planning, AI integration, and organizational transformation. Inara, welcome to Unfixed.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You've recently written that for the first time since ChatGPT launched, it feels like we're actually losing ground in how higher ed is thinking about AI. That's something that actually Zach and I have been talking about too. What are you seeing in the discourse that makes you feel like it's a step backward rather than forward?
Yeah, this is something that I have been seeing both from faculty and increasingly from students. And I think it's probably true across, our society as a whole. So I think it's being reflected within higher education in a way that's really true to what we see in the common discourse. But what I think I've seen is sort of there was this initial fear or initial concerns about AI that led to some people really adopting quickly, some not. But for the folks who were adopting, I think there was a somewhat steady trajectory. Like we were going to find the early adopters, we were going to work with those folks, we were going to be able to start integrating some technology throughout the curriculum. And now what I think I'm seeing is many more people who are really concerned, deeply, deeply concerned about the technology and are taking that concern to the extent of saying, I want to block it, or we want to have, really strong opt-out policies for students and faculty to not have to engage with the technology at all. And that's what has me concerned. And just to briefly suggest why, I think there's a huge, enormous importance for having folks in the discourse who are opposed to AI, who have concerns about AI. That is absolutely not the concern. It's not a concern that people want to be able to push back. It's a concern that folks want to be able to opt out from using it or understanding it or learning about it. And my concern is that I think when you do that, when you don't learn, particularly for faculty, if you don't understand how students are using the technology, what I think that you're doing is actually accelerating their loss of critical thinking and learning. And that's, I can talk about that more, but that's really my biggest concern is I feel like this sort of opt-out stance where folks are saying, I don't want anything to do with it. I think it's wrong. I think it's bad. And therefore, I'm not going to touch it. And my students can do what they're going to do, but I'm going to tell them not to use it and then, just see what happens. I think that's really dangerous. And I think it has a really negative impact on students.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this as sort of like abstinence-only pedagogy, where there is a drive where it's just don't do it. And that's the statement. But behind that statement is a lot of, like you said, real fears and concerns about this technology. But I just think that is not productive, and it's going to drive this underground, in the sense that we won't know what our students are doing. They won't want to talk to us about it. Even our colleagues, it's already hard enough over the last 3 years to talk to, colleagues about, well, how are you using it, right? That's always a little dangerous kind of conversation there. And I've definitely noticed that it's veered more to that direction.
Yeah. And I think there's so many other concerns. One of the concerns that really comes top of mind for me is really an equity concern. So we're going to see this acceleration of students who are comfortable with the technology and are using the technology, and there are students who are already going to be successful in many ways. They already have a lot going for them in terms of support at home or access to tutors, or they're coming from homes in which there is a lot of technology, right? Those students are using the technology. The students who are not using the technology, who are scared of being accused of cheating, they're concerned about not learning effectively. Great, important, valid concern. But if we're not teaching them how to use it, they're competing for jobs, they're competing for grades in some cases, for faculty who still use curves, right? They're competing against this with other students. And we're just accelerating these equity gaps. You see it in the fact that women use AI at lower rates than men do. So there are a lot of equity concerns that are embedded in this for me. The other aspect of this that I find really important is personally, I think this is probably true for you too. My sizes of my classes are getting bigger, right? Like we're all in a budget, crunch, right? And AI allows my students to learn more. We typically frame out AI, it's sort of like, is it unethical to use it? I would love to have the conversation with somebody to say, is it ethical for you not to use it? If you could have better designed learning materials, if you could have better videos that you could record for your online students, if you could have more effective in-class learning activities, if you could have one-on-one tutoring for your students, and you're just denying your students all of those things, is that ethical? Like I think that's an important conversation
really
to have.
Interesting way to put that. Yeah.
Those are great points, and I was going to ask you a follow-up, but it's actually the next question that we have. So we'll just jump in there. There's this dominant claim that AI is eroding students' critical thinking, and the survey data seems to reinforce that fear. But you push back on that framing. What do you think people are getting wrong when they talk about AI and critical thinking?
So I think there's absolutely no doubt that if you rely on AI to do your thinking for you, you will erode your critical thinking capacity and your learning over time. And that's the baseline, right? So if you outsource your learning, and we've all made this analogy, but it's just like if I take the bus to the gym, right? And then I take the bus home from the gym and I have a robot do my workout for me. Of course, I'm not going to get the benefit of that workout. So what people I think are missing is that there are a lot of different ways to use AI. And our research has tended to focus on where does the use fit on the Bloom's taxonomy, right? Or something like that. So we'll look at our existing learning frames and the way that we understand how learning occurs. And we'll try to map AI use onto that. And the problem is that when you use AI, it can do a lot of different things at the same time and within the same task. So I could say, well, students are, brainstorming with AI. Well, what does that mean exactly? Is a student just saying, hey, AI, here's a hypothetical, now brainstorm answers to me, and then they're cutting and pasting that and putting it into another document and calling that thinking? Because that's not thinking, right? They're just, queuing something into an LLM chat. If, on the other hand, what they're doing is they're saying, hey, I have a need to develop a tool to help a student with a disability access some classroom materials. Give me 5 different ways that I might be able to do that. And then they iterate with that, right? There's still some amount of offloading that's going on, but it's different. It's looking different. Now let's say that they're using the AI and the AI says to them, I'm a Socratic tutor and I want you to defend your position on X. Tell me what your position is. And the AI stops there. The student explains their position. AI comes back and says, well, but what about this? Did you think about this? And then the student has to defend their position, right? Those are radically different uses of the tool. And so when we say it's eroding critical thinking, it can absolutely erode critical thinking. That doesn't mean it always does. And so I think we really have to divide out the way that the student is actually using it and where the learning is occurring.
Yeah.
That's such an important nuanced take, and it's sort of there are miles in between that and how we see lots of people talking about the technology, student development, and student learning. And I'm going to have a brief analogy here that I think about a lot. So, I love my mother-in-law to death. She's awesome. She's a retired school teacher, and she's been retired for, I think, 9 years now. She's just as sharp as she was when she was arranging students and grading work and providing feedback and all that sort of stuff. And it's because she recognized I need to do different stuff with my brain to engage my
Mm-hmm.
brain, right? And so she's not in the classroom anymore, but nothing pleases her more than going to Barnes and Noble and picking up like a huge compendium of crossword puzzles from the New York Times and then just like spending an afternoon doing those. And I've like watched it over her shoulder, and it's remarkable. And if we imagine a world where students are not doing any thinking, where they are just dumping assignment guides and other
Mm-hmm.
stuff and copying and pasting large language model outputs and turning that in, yeah, sure. Students, that's not going to be great for their cognitive development. But if they are doing stuff inside the LLM, outside the LLM, they're going to develop. It might be differently than how all of us developed, but like they're still going to engage in that same sort of practice of refining and improving your critical thinking. It might just look a little bit different, and maybe they're able to do more than we were able to do when we were 20 years old. But there's this sort of black and white vision that a lot of faculty have developed about engagement with the technology, and some early research that has been, it seems like, purposefully misread a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
about this, that has sort of, it's making it harder to have these conversations.
Yeah, I think there's a real connection too to the first question we asked about the discourse and like the people who want to ban it or opt out by trying to steer the discourse, but also the practice at universities away from the technologies. It takes away that space to experiment, to understand what does critical thinking look like in the age of
Yeah.
AI. Don't we want to know an answer to that question? I mean, we have to be able to use the tools and see people use it and test things out and try to figure what that looks like. Because, I mean, it's not like we had a great world of critical thinking in 2021 and in 2018. I mean, I was just telling my students, like, wasn't 2018 the greatest when we all had critical thinking and the world was so perfect? I mean, that's just not how it is.
Right.
So,
That's
Yeah,
right. Yep.
Nick, we wrote that piece about nostalgia a
yeah.
couple of months back, and I mean, I still find myself, I'm not necessarily telling people go read this thing that we wrote. I'm more like drawing on those themes because, yeah, I mean, there's some indication, and I've heard some conversations about this lately, that it's not like we were particularly great at this before large language models
That's right.
emerged. We saw a lot of the same complaints in the pages of the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed at that time than we do today.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Nick, I appreciate you kind of pulling those threads together too from that first question, because here's where the challenge really comes in is, let's say that you are, you sort of don't use AI at all in college. You're absolutely opposed to it. You're terrified you're going to get accused of cheating. Your faculty seem to be opposed to it. And then you get to work, right? You graduate, you're in a job, and your employer absolutely expects you to be using AI. Well, what do you start to do? You start to, use the LLM, and then you put queries in it, and it gives you back an answer. And there's this whole host of skills you don't have. So you don't
Mhm.
really understand what it means when the AI is being sycophantic. So you don't understand that it is just endlessly going to affirm you. And you don't have the experience of pushing back on it. You don't have the experience of coming back to it and saying, don't answer this question for me. Ask me questions first so that you understand the nuances of the context I'm working in. You don't know how to cue it to say, hey, you're starting to, tell me what to do. I don't want that. I just want some suggestions about this, right? And so if you've never had those experiences of trying to push back on the drift, I call this role drift in this paper about the AI cognitive period, the LLMs are set up to provide you with answers. And if you haven't, you can know that on some kind of a level. If you have not had the experience and learned how to push back, you are going to get sucked in by that LLM and you are going to lose sight of the fact that you are not engaging in critical thinking. That's why I think it's so important that we have these opportunities to teach these skills.
I mean, I'm just going to go back to the abstinence only because I think that's the parallels are kind of there. I'm just testing this one out here, folks. But like, it's like if you don't know anything about sex and you're going off into the world, you don't know what to think about, how to feel, and how to act with other people. So, yeah, that's a really good point. So, and you alluded to this paper that you've just recently published, or I think maybe it's coming out officially. Also, you told us that it's been translated into French, but it's the AI cognitive pyramid, and it's a framework that you've been developing. So help us kind of walk us through the AI cognitive pyramid. And reader, you're going to have to kind of think about a pyramid in your head here,
Right.
no visuals here. How it changes what good AI integration and teaching assignments might look like. So help, walk us through that.
Yeah, we are going to do everybody's favorite podcast thing where we spend a couple minutes describing a visual. So just brace yourselves, but we will put the article in the show notes.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So the article is it's a preprint. It's up on SSRN right now. Would love to hear from folks if they take a look at it. So what I was trying to do is I was doing a lot of workshops and working with a lot of faculty around AI and trying to explain, what we were just talking about, which is it's not just do you use it or do you not use it? It's how you use it. And the key question for me is where does the thinking reside? So I don't care if you're brainstorming or editing or revising or evaluating or analyzing, right? You can stick whatever label you want to on a task, but who is doing that task is really the essential question for me. So what the AI cognitive pyramid does is it just creates these different roles that AI can take on. And it's organized at the bottom of the pyramid. We have AI as executor. And this is when you're genuinely outsourcing your thinking to AI. And this is not a judgment-based framework. There's a lot of really good uses for AI as executor. There's a whole theory of literature around cognitive load theory, and we want to try to offload non-germane tasks. So if I am learning about argumentation, I don't want to spend all of my time worrying about grammar, right? So offloading is not a bad thing to do, but we have to recognize it when it's happening. So AI as executor is the bottom of the pyramid. That's that role. And then as we move up the pyramid, the different roles, there's AI as scaffold. And so this might be, where you're using the AI as a tutor, where it is maybe giving you practice questions and then coming back, telling you what you got wrong, giving you some suggestions for how to make it better. Next up is AI as reflector. And in this role, the AI is actually taking student work. And the key here is that it's actually been generated by the student or by the learner, and then is providing some kind of metacognitive reflection on it. Either it's providing feedback or challenging or asking the student about their process, lots of different opportunities. But the student was the one who generated the work, not the AI. That's really important. Next up is AI as evidence. So this is where you actually have students critically reflecting on something the AI generated. So the students have to come up with the evaluative frame. And then the very top of the pyramid, and it sounds like, Zach, since you have a background in debate, you'll love this one, right? It's the AI as opponent. So this is where you actually really get into a Socratic dialogue. And those of us who went to law school love the Socratic method because we think about teaching through questioning, where you never answer the whole point is the question. And so the pyramid is organized this way because as you move up the pyramid, you're increasing human agency and judgment, and you're also decreasing the potential for offloading. So that's where the higher that you get on the pyramid, the different roles for AI are actually going to change the way that the student engages with the tool, and most importantly, really work on preserving critical thinking.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Zach, where are you gonna?
I was just going to say, I appreciate you putting this together and publishing this. We're going to probably borrow some stuff from this for a program that I run that Nik works on as well, called the AI Retrofit, that will run in May. Because in a lot of ways, what what you did here is so helpful in that there are fragments of this that we've been talking about
Hmm.
and sort of dancing around and be like, oh, you can use it this way and that helps students in this way or whatever. And this provides a cohesive structure to all those sort of like anecdotes and little examples that we've been bouncing around for the last couple of years. So, um, I mean, the visual is great, but yeah, that's what I really loved about this is like, oh, this is like a coherent theory that pulls together all of these different things that, we've had a piece of this over here, and here's something that I learned talking with a handful of students here, but this really just seems to bring everything together. So
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's also really applicable to the other kind of work that faculty do or staff do at the university around, the day-to-day, more bureaucratic kind of tasks managing the university. Because I talk to students or other faculty about those of us who use AI as sort of as a coworker, how much work goes into talking with it, to prompting it, to guiding it, to creating the contexts for it. But
Mhm.
also the parts where you can just sort of offload, right? Because the main task, the main event is not that little detail. That's perfect for that. And so it helps us organize a language around, yeah, the kind of work we do and the way we assign different parts of it to AI and becoming to sort of a better understanding of, that's okay for that thing. And then on this thing, I kind of want to retain the core thing. And then when we're in that hybrid mode, there's still the human in the driver's seat there with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing that was really important to me is that a lot of faculty will see that there is a body of research out there suggesting that AI impedes critical thinking and learning, or it'll show, yeah, students engaged and they had great practice tests, but then their actual, retention 45 days later is significantly less when they used AI, or it's a preprint, it's still never been published, but the study that everybody looked at, which was the brain waves, right? And you're not engaging, right, when you're offloading into the AI. And so it felt really important to me that people had a language to say, yes, that can be true. And it can also be true that if you use it in this other way, you are going to build these critical thinking skills. So I think we needed a language for being able to distinguish between those. And the other thing that this is trying to do is to engage with the pedagogy literature and the literature of sort of cognitive theory and how we think and learn. And so that's embedded in the paper if folks want to go out and look at it, in terms of desirable difficulties, right? We know that you have to have friction in order to encode knowledge and information. Students who generate something are going to encode that knowledge differently than a student who just writes it down or retrieves it from a different source. So that there are all these different theories that really go into this to say this isn't just a way of organizing this information, but it's actually a theory-based way. And for faculty and administrators who are trying to defend AI use, I think that's really important because we need to be able to explain to our colleagues, we're not just making this stuff up. Like this
Hmm.
actually matters the way that you structure
Yeah.
this usage.
I want to tie back to the first question that Nick asked about the state of the discourse, because several things, including the thing that you sort of mentioned there, it's triggering for me that brainwave article that it always had
Mm-hmm.
that visual from it that was not even in the original article. It was just something that somebody like made probably with an LLM. But the amount of times that I saw that shared on LinkedIn or show up in my inbox or in an article somewhere, I mean, I went, as I'm sure you two did, and read the original article just because, I'm a dorky academic or whatever. And I was like, oh man, this like does not say this at all. And but in some ways, that's one of the things that has damaged so much of the discourse that we're having is we've had the propagation of a couple of these things that confirm a bias or perspective that somebody already exists, and they have gained so much traction in the
Yeah.
ether. And I don't know. It's a tough hill to climb right now, but
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
paper
Yeah.
and a handful of others have been part of getting us in this.
I mean, it's frankly the media environment, whether it's social media or legacy media. I mean, it is such a tough environment to try to present nuanced takes on anything, obviously, in any kind
Yeah,
of category. But in this in particular, it's really, Zach and I every once in a while have to write a piece of like, well, here's that crappy article or theory being propagated
right.
again. Like, and it's not because we're here shilling for the AI companies. That's not my job. But my
Yeah.
job is to think critically and to like wade through different perspectives. And there's just a lot of lazy takes, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, and to to be fair, and I really appreciated you had a guest on talking about grief and how people are working through grief. There is something lost when we use
Hmm.
these tools, and I always think that's really important to hold space for that and say, look, yeah, it is something lost, right? When we are talking to AI, instead of talking to, would it be better to talk to a faculty member and have a one-on-one Socratic dialogue with me about your business law class? Absolutely. Do I have the ability to do that for all 65 students in my asynchronous online business law class? I don't. So, I think, I want to be careful to like recognize like there's a huge identity threat there. What are we doing in the classroom? What's our role? What's our job? If this thing can be this one-on-one, tutor, if it can engage so deeply with students, if it can help them learn so well, if it's better than active learning, there's some Harvard studies with a very specially designed chatbot, like really, really good chatbot, right? It's not just that you throw students into an LLM, but you have to design the tool. Who are we? What are we doing? These are
Hmm.
terrifying questions for people. And so I think, I want to figure out ways that we can hold a yes and for people to say, yes, it's scary. Yes, it can erode critical thinking. And look, there are ways that we can harness it. There are ways that we can make it safer, and there are ways that we can actually benefit our students.
I love that answer, and it kind of cues up our fourth question here. People often say AI is here to stay, but that phrase can mean a lot of different things and can sound like an uncritical embrace of the technology. What does it actually require of institutions and instructors if we take that phrase seriously?
I have a friend and colleague who once said, nobody ever put a useful technology back in the box, right? So I think that that is true. And so I guess the way that I would think about it is that there are a lot of big, scary challenges in the world today that we have been wrestling with for more than the past 4 years, right? We've been wrestling with climate change. We have been wrestling with social media and increasing isolationism. We have been wrestling with an epic of loneliness. These are big, scary, hard societal concerns. And to me, this, and as an environmentalist, right, somebody who actually studies sustainability, and that's part of my life's work. We haven't talked about the environmental aspect, but that's important to me.
That'll take
We
another hour or two.
Yeah, right, exactly. Another hour. But like we were failing at that before AI,
Hmm.
but we
Hmm.
were not protecting the planet. So I want to be really clear. Like it's not like we were on a path to sustainability and then AI came along and then, oh no, now we're not. Right. So I think, in a positive way, having a tool that can unlock these incredible solutions that can be out there to solve these huge, enormous, terrifying problems is really good. It's really good. It is also really bad. So I think having AI here to stay means, just like everything else that we deal with in this world, life is really hard and complicated. And there's never going to be an easy answer where we're going to say, oh, if we could just ban the technology, then everything would be okay. Because that wasn't true before and it's not going to be true afterwards. So to me, what that means is great. We have this potential tool. It can do wonderful things. It can do terrible things. The answer is to figure out how to harness it, how to regulate it. I'm a lawyer. I'm in favor of a good regulation. So, how do we regulate it effectively? How do we think about how it can be safely used? How do we make sure that it doesn't have negative consequences? So, those are the things that are suggested to me is let's deal with the nuance and the ambiguity. Let's not try to put this in a good, bad box because the world just doesn't work that way.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I definitely agree. I did have a bonus question here to pivot because we've got you on the air. It's more on the lighthearted point. Okay, a couple of weeks ago, you had a post on LinkedIn about, what was it, goblins and gremlins?
The goblins and gremlins.
Tell us about that. What is going on there?
Great. So I don't remember which model upgrade it was. It was, it was like Chat GPT went from 3.5.3 to 5.4, whichever. There was one model release ago. And I was using it for something soon after the release. And like every answer it gave me had a gremlin in it somewhere. So imagine you're like asking it, I'm trying to calculate the square footage of tile that I'm going to need for a bathroom remodeling project. And it comes back and it says something funny like, boy, the gremlins really come out when you try to measure tile. Yeah. And it was like 5 times in a row. It's either goblins or gremlins, but they kept coming up. This has become unusable to me. So, I changed my profile because you had different profiles, right? And I was nerdy because I am. So I had the nerdy profile. I changed it away from that. It got a little bit better, but honestly, that was part of me. Like I got to move away from ChatGPT because there's so many gremlins. It's driving me crazy. So then last week, someone noticed that there's actually now hard coded into the most recent upgrade of the new model for ChatGPT, a line of code that says, don't mention creatures, including goblins and gremlins, unless it's absolutely required by the question. And there's this fascinating post by OpenAI where they describe the process by which gremlins and goblins started multiplying within ChatGPT and within the inference, and then how they had to like take this really drastic step to try to reel it back. It was people who were, had the nerdy profile, but it became kind of embedded in the technology. And I just think it's such a perfect thing for us all to look at because look, we all use the technology all the time. It is so easy to forget that you are not talking to a human intelligence. It just is. And we have to be reminded of that every once in a while to say, yeah, this thing actually is a bunch of ones and zeros. And let me show you what happens when those ones and zeros go down the wrong path and start self-reinforcing around something like goblins and gremlins. So lighthearted, but also I think a good, reminder that, this technology is in fact technology.
I love this story because I saw that post by OpenAI and it triggered my memory of your post. Because honestly, when I saw your post, I was like, I have no idea something went really wrong with Inara's ChatGPT. And I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is like a real,
it's real.
real thing.
I feel so vindicated because I know I was like the only one. Everyone's like, what is wrong with you? What are you doing wrong that you're bringing up all these goblins and gremlins? Now I'm like, look, I was one of the smart ones. Like I actually surfaced this problem for Chat. They should give me like kind of a credit.
I definitely think there's a royalty check incoming for sure.
You know what? Probably.
There are certainly times when all of us find this technology frustrating, but one of the things that I have liked about experimenting and writing in this space is that it's weird.
Yeah.
Right? There's a bunch of tech stuff that we touch and interact with that is kind of cold and predictable. And that can be really good, having determinative systems and knowing what the outcomes are going to be. There are lots of times when that's really helpful. But this is kind of like introduced, certainly some destructive chaos in some areas, but also some kind of fun chaos into different things.
Yeah.
That is just made me be like, oh, this is definitely not boring, right?
Yeah.
It's frustrating, it's infuriating sometimes, but like I'm not bored reading about it, using it. It's interesting.
No. Yeah. I mean, I think the way that it has challenged our ability to understand, not to go too deep, but like, what is human consciousness? What does separate us from the robots? Like, how do we think about what it means to be human? I think these are all really important questions to ask. And I was really struck. I heard somewhere, and I can't remember who said it, but they were talking about the Turing test and how, because the GPT can so easily pass the Turing test now that we've just created new Turing tests, that we're so determined to figure out what is special about humans that we're just going to create the next thing that AI can't do and say, well, that's what it means to be human because it can't do that. Well, okay, it can do that now. Okay, well, then that must not be what it means to be human, because clearly if it can do it, then that, it's sort of, it's just a recursive argument. And so I just think that that is incredibly interesting, is how much time we can spend thinking about what is it to be human, and to really deeply ponder on that in a really beautiful way, right? Like, we're something magical and wonderful and special, and thinking about that can't be a bad thing.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. You can find our writing on meltsintoair.org and on LinkedIn, Zach Justice and Nik Janos. Find these links and more in the show notes. If you have feedback or want to share an idea, email us at unfixed@meltsintoair.org. Thank you to Jamie Gunderson for producing and editing the show.